The ringing of my phone jolted me from a much-needed nap. "Ben, it's your day off, right?" Levi's voice boomed through the speaker. "Yeah, finally getting some rest. What's up?" I rubbed my eyes, sitting upright on the worn couch that doubled as my bed. "I've met someone, and I'm going to marry her. You need to meet her." The excitement in my younger brother's tone was palpable, and I couldn't help but smile. Levi's successes in life were a stark contrast to my own struggles. While he thrived in the corporate world, I barely scraped by as a construction worker, having dropped out of high school years ago to support us both. Our mother had abandoned us when Levi was just a toddler, leaving me to be the caretaker. Dad was around, but his presence was fleeting at best. I still remembered the countless nights I'd gone hungry just to ensure Levi had something to eat. Despite the hardships, we remained close, and Levi's achievements filled me with pride. If anyone deserved happiness, it was him. "That's great news, bro," I replied, trying to match his enthusiasm. "When can I meet her?" The rest of the week flew by, and before I knew it, Levi was knocking on my apartment door, his fiancée in tow. Amanda Bridges was a striking woman, her designer clothes and perfectly coiffed hair a stark contrast to my modest surroundings. "Ben, this is Amanda," Levi beamed, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Amanda, meet my big brother." Her gaze swept over me, a slight crinkle forming between her perfectly sculpted eyebrows. I didn't realize Levi had a brother who didn't finish high school. The word stung, but I forced a smile. Yeah, I had to start working early to take care of Levi. Levi shot her a look, but Amanda remained unfazed. As the evening progressed, her subtle jabs continued, each one chipping away at my confidence. "This apartment could use a woman's touch," she remarked, eyeing the cluttered living space with disdain. "Ben's been too busy working to worry about decor," Levi replied, his tone edged with a warning. But Amanda pressed on, her comments growing bolder with each passing minute. By the time they left, I felt like a failure, unworthy of my own brother's company. The following week, Amanda cornered me outside my apartment. "Ben, I can't have you attend the wedding," she stated bluntly. "Your presence would undermine our image." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "I'm Levi's only family. How can you ask me to do that?" Her perfectly glossed lips curved into a condescending smile. "Levi deserves better than a high school dropout for a brother. Do the right thing and stay away." Shame washed over me as her words hit their mark. Levi had worked so hard to achieve success, and I was holding him back. With a heavy heart, I agreed to her demands, convincing myself it was for the best. A few weeks later, Levi showed up at my door again, this time with Amanda in tow. Her nose crinkled as she stepped inside, her eyes sweeping over the modest living space with disdain. "This is where you live?" she asked, her voice dripping with judgment. Before I could respond, Levi shot me an apologetic look. "Amanda wanted to see your place." I forced a smile, determined not to let her get under my skin. "Make yourselves at home." Amanda perched on the edge of the couch, her posture stiff and uncomfortable. "I must say, Ben, I'm surprised Levi didn't mention your living situation." "What's wrong with it?" I challenged, unable to bite my tongue any longer. Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched in mock surprise. "Well, it's just rather modest, don't you think? Especially for someone who works in construction." Levi shifted uncomfortably beside her. "Amanda, that's enough." But she ignored him, her gaze boring into me with thinly veiled disdain. I simply expected more from Levi's family. After all, he's worked so hard to better himself. The implication was clear. I was a disappointment, a stain on Levi's success. My jaw clenched as anger bubbled within me, but I swallowed it down, refusing to give her the satisfaction. "I may not have much, but I've always done my best for Levi," I said, my voice tight with restrained emotion. Amanda's lips curved into a condescending smile. "Of course, dear. I'm sure you meant well." The rest of the evening was a blur of thinly veiled insults and snide remarks, each one chipping away at my already fragile self-esteem. By the time they left, I felt like a failure, unworthy of my own brother's company. In the days that followed, Amanda's words haunted me, echoing in my mind like a relentless mantra. I was a disappointment, a burden on Levi's success. The thought consumed me, fueling a growing sense of resentment towards the woman who had so effortlessly torn me down. But I couldn't bring myself to confront Levi about it. He seemed so happy, so utterly smitten with Amanda. Who was I to stand in the way of his happiness, even if it came at the cost of my own self-worth? So I kept my mouth shut, burying my feelings deep inside and forcing a smile whenever Levi brought up the wedding plans. It was a small price to pay, I told myself, for the sake of my brother's happiness. But as the weeks ticked by, Amanda's cruelty only intensified, her barbs growing sharper and more pointed with each encounter. It was as if she took perverse pleasure in tormenting me, reveling in the power she held over my fragile sense of self. And through it all, Levi remained oblivious, too blinded by love to see the truth behind Amanda's carefully crafted facade. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of activity, and I found myself caught in the eye of the storm. Levi was constantly busy with preparations, leaving me to fend off Amanda's relentless attacks alone. It was during one of these encounters that she finally dropped the bombshell. "Ben, I can't have you attend the wedding," she stated bluntly, cornering me outside my apartment one evening. I stared at her, dumbfounded. "What? Why not?" Her perfectly glossed lips curved into a condescending smile. "Your presence would undermine our image. Levi deserves better than a high school dropout for a brother." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. I opened my mouth to protest, but Amanda held up a perfectly manicured hand, effectively silencing me. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Ben. Do the right thing and stay away." Shame washed over me as her words hit their mark. She was right. Levi had worked so hard to achieve success, and I was holding him back. With a heavy heart, I nodded, too stunned to formulate a response. Amanda's smile widened, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. "I knew you'd see reason. This is for the best, believe me." As she turned and walked away, I felt something inside me shatter. All the sacrifices I'd made for Levi, all the nights I'd gone hungry to ensure he had a roof over his head, it all meant nothing in the face of Amanda's cruel judgment. In the days that followed, I wrestled with the decision. Torn between my love for Levi and the gnawing sense of inadequacy that Amanda had so expertly cultivated. I wanted nothing more than to be there for my brother on his special day, but the fear of embarrassing him or ruining his happiness was too great a risk. So I stayed silent, burying my pain and resentment deep inside, forcing a smile whenever Levi brought up the wedding plans. It was a small price to pay, I told myself, for the sake of his happiness. But as the big day drew nearer, my resolve began to waver. Memories of our childhood flickered through my mind, reminding me of all the times I'd been there for Levi when no one else was. How could I abandon him now, when he needed me most? The night before the wedding, I found myself pacing the floor of my tiny apartment, consumed by indecision. Part of me longed to defy Amanda's cruel demands, to show up and support my brother no matter the cost. But the other part, the part that had been beaten down and demoralized by her relentless attacks, whispered that I didn't belong. As the hours ticked by, I wrestled with the decision, torn between my love for Levi and the fear of bringing him shame. It was a battle I knew I couldn't win alone. A few days before the wedding, I found myself at my grandfather's funeral, surrounded by the few remaining members of our fractured family. As I stood beside the open casket, staring at the weathered face of the man who had been more of a father to me than my own, a familiar voice called out from behind. "Ben Harper, is that you?" I turned to see Ray Morgan, my grandfather's oldest friend, approaching with a warm smile. "It's been too long, son." I embraced the old man, grateful for his comforting presence. "Thanks for coming, Ray. Gramps would have been happy to see you." Ray's eyes crinkled at the corners as he studied my face. "You've been through a lot, haven't you, boy? Life hasn't been easy on you." I shrugged, trying to brush off his concern. "It is what it is. I've had to make sacrifices, but it was worth it for Levi." Ray's expression softened, and he placed a weathered hand on my shoulder. "Your sacrifices haven't gone unnoticed, Ben. Your brother owes you more than he knows." Tears stung my eyes as the weight of his words hit me. All these years, I'd been silently carrying the burden, never once expecting recognition or gratitude. But hearing Ray acknowledge my struggles, it was like a dam breaking within me. Before I knew it, the words were tumbling out, unbidden. I told him everything, about Amanda's cruel demands, her relentless attacks on my self-worth, and my fear of ruining Levi's special day. Ray listened patiently, his brow furrowed in concern. When I finished, he shook his head slowly. "That woman doesn't deserve your brother, Ben. And you sure as hell don't deserve to be treated like that." His words struck a chord, resonating deep within me. For the first time, I felt a flicker of defiance, a spark of resistance against Amanda's cruelty. "What should I do, Ray?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. The old man's eyes hardened, a steely determination settling over his features. "You show up at that wedding, son. You show up and you remind your brother who's been there for him all these years. Blood is thicker than water, and no amount of money or status can change that. As I left the funeral, Ray's words echoed in my mind, igniting a fire within me that I thought had long since been extinguished. I was done being a doormat, done letting Amanda walk all over me and my family. This was my brother's wedding, and I'd be damned if I let her keep me away. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, but the turmoil within me was far from settled. Ray's words had reignited a fire in my soul, but the fear of disappointing Levi still gnawed at the back of my mind. As I paced the floor of my apartment, my gaze kept drifting to the neatly pressed suit hanging in the corner, a silent reminder of the decision I had yet to make. Part of me longed to put it on, to show up and support my brother no matter the cost. But the other part, the part that had been beaten down and demoralized by Amanda's relentless attacks, whispered that I didn't belong. In the end, it was the thought of my grandfather that tipped the scales. He had always been my rock, my guiding light in the darkest of times. And I knew, deep down, that he would want me to be there for Levi, no matter what. With a newfound resolve, I donned the suit and headed out the door, my heart pounding with a mixture of nerves and determination. As I approached the church, the sound of laughter and music drifted through the open doors, mingling with the excited chatter of guests. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside, my eyes immediately drawn to the lavish decorations and the throngs of well-dressed strangers milling about. It was then that I noticed the odd looks being exchanged, the hushed whispers and sidelong glances in my direction. Something wasn't right. Before I could ponder it further, a familiar figure emerged from the crowd, her eyes widening in shock and fury. "Ben," Amanda hissed, her perfectly painted lips curling into a sneer. "What are you doing here?" I straightened my spine, summoning every ounce of courage I possessed. "This is my brother's wedding. I have every right to be here." Her eyes narrowed, and she took a step closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You're ruining everything, Ben. Why couldn't you just stay away?" But before I could respond, a commotion erupted from the other side of the room, drawing everyone's attention. A young woman I didn't recognize was shouting, her face flushed with anger. "You lied to me, Amanda. You said this was a family event." Amanda's mask of composure slipped, and she whirled around, her perfectly coiffed hair swinging wildly. "What are you talking about?" The woman gestured to the crowd, her eyes flashing with fury. "These people aren't your family. They're all hired actors, just like me." A hush fell over the room as the guests absorbed her words, their expressions ranging from shock to outrage. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my ears as the truth sank in. Amanda had hired fake relatives to attend the wedding, all in a desperate bid to maintain her perfect facade. As the murmurs grew louder, Levi emerged from a side room, his face etched with confusion. "What's going on here?" Our eyes met, and in that moment, I saw a glimmer of understanding dawn in his expression. He knew, just as I did, that Amanda's carefully constructed world was crumbling around us. With a resolve I didn't know I possessed, I stepped forward, my gaze never wavering from my brother's. "Levi, there's something you need to know." The air was thick with tension as Levi's gaze shifted between me and the furious woman who had exposed Amanda's lies. Confusion and betrayal flickered across his face, and for a moment I feared he wouldn't believe me. But then, another voice rang out from the crowd, one that sent a chill down my spine. "Ben, is that really you?" My head whipped around, and there, standing among the sea of hired actors, was a familiar face, Sarah Reed, my old friend from high school. "Sarah?" I breathed, hardly daring to believe my eyes. "What are you doing here?" She stepped forward, her expression a mixture of disbelief and something else, something I couldn't quite place. "Amanda hired me, too. She said it was a family event, but then I realized none of these people were actually related to her." A hush fell over the room as Sarah's words sank in, and all eyes turned to Amanda, who stood frozen, her perfectly composed mask cracking under the weight of scrutiny. Levi was the first to break the silence, his voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "Amanda, what is going on here? Who are all these people?" For a moment, Amanda said nothing, her eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. Then her shoulders slumped, and she let out a bitter laugh. "Fine, you want the truth? These people are actors, hired to play the part of my loving family. Happy now?" A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, and I saw Levi recoil as if he'd been struck. "But why?" he whispered, his voice laced with hurt. Amanda's eyes narrowed, and she turned her gaze on me, her lips curling into a sneer. Because of him. Your pathetic excuse for a brother. I tensed, bracing myself for the onslaught of insults I knew was coming. From the moment I met Ben, I knew he was a liability. A high school dropout with no ambition, no drive. He was a stain on our perfect future. So I did what I had to do to protect us. Levi's eyes widened, and he shook his head slowly as if trying to dispel a bad dream. You mean you did all this because of Ben? Amanda scoffed, her disdain palpable. Of course I did. I couldn't have my future husband's family embarrassing us in front of everyone. It would have ruined everything. Silence hung heavy in the air, punctuated only by the occasional murmur of disbelief. I watched as Levi's expression hardened, the hurt and betrayal giving way to something darker, something I'd never seen in him before. You lied to me, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You manipulated me, made me turn my back on my own brother. How could you do that, Amanda? For once, Amanda seemed at a loss for words, her carefully crafted facade crumbling before our eyes. Levi shook his head, his jaw clenched with barely contained rage. This wedding is off. I can't marry someone who would stoop so low, who would treat my family like that. A chorus of gasps and murmurs erupted from the crowd, but I barely heard them. All I could focus on was the look of vindication on Sarah's face as she stepped forward, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. That's not all, Levi, she said, her voice ringing out loud and clear. Amanda was planning to move far away after the wedding, leaving you behind without a second thought. The words hung in the air like a physical blow, and I watched as the color drained from Amanda's face. For the first time, she looked truly afraid. That's not true, she sputtered, her composure finally shattering. I would never. But Levi held up a hand, effectively silencing her. Save it, Amanda. I've heard enough. With that, he turned and stormed out of the church, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Amanda stood frozen, her perfect facade in tatters, as the guests erupted into a flurry of whispers and accusations. And in that moment, as I watched her world crumble around her, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. The woman who had tormented me, who had tried to tear my family apart, was finally getting her comeuppance. It was a small victory, but one that tasted oh so sweet. The aftermath of Amanda's exposure was like a whirlwind, sweeping through the church and leaving chaos in its wake. Guests scrambled to their feet, some rushing to comfort Levi, others hurling accusations at the shell-shocked Amanda. In the midst of the pandemonium, a familiar figure emerged from the crowd, his face etched with a mixture of fury and disbelief. Amanda, what have you done? Mr. Bridges, her father and a prominent bank executive, hissed, his eyes blazing with barely contained rage. Amanda opened her mouth, but no words came out. For once, the woman who had so effortlessly shredded my self-worth was rendered speechless. Mr. Bridges turned to me, his gaze softening ever so slightly. Ben, I had no idea she was capable of such deceit. I met his stare, feeling a strange sense of pity for the man whose daughter had so thoroughly disgraced him. I tried to warn Levi, but she wouldn't listen. He nodded, his jaw clenched tight. I'll deal with her later. Right now, your brother needs you. With those words, he pivoted on his heel and stormed off, leaving Amanda to face the wrath of the scorned guests alone. I didn't spare her a second glance. My focus was solely on Levi, who had retreated to a quiet corner of the church, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Levi? I approached cautiously, unsure of what to say. He looked up, his eyes haunted by a pain I couldn't begin to fathom. How could I have been so blind, Ben? How did I not see what she was really like? I sank onto the pew beside him, struggling to find the right words. She fooled us all, bro, but that's not on you. Levi shook his head, his gaze dropping to the floor. I trusted her, Ben. I was ready to spend the rest of my life with her. How could she do this, and to my own brother? The anguish in his voice was like a physical blow, and I found myself fighting back tears. All those years of sacrifice, of putting his needs before my own, and in the end, it had nearly cost him everything. I'm so sorry, Levi, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. If I had said something sooner, maybe. But he cut me off, his head snapping up with a fierceness I'd never seen before. No, Ben, don't you dare apologize for her actions. This is on her, not you. He reached out and grasped my hand, his grip firm and reassuring. You're my brother, Ben, my family, and I let some manipulative woman come between us. That's on me. I opened my mouth to protest, but the words died on my lips as Levi pulled me into a fierce embrace, his body trembling with barely contained emotion. Thank you, he murmured, his voice muffled against my shoulder. Thank you for being there, even when I didn't deserve it. In that moment, all the pain and resentment I'd harbored towards Amanda melted away, replaced by a profound sense of relief and gratitude. My brother was back, and our bond was stronger than ever. As we pulled apart, I caught sight of Sarah lingering nearby, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Sarah," I called out, beckoning her over. "Thank you for telling the truth. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there." She shook her head, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "I couldn't let her get away with it, Ben. Not after everything she put you through." Levi's brow furrowed as he looked between us, realization dawning on his face. "You two know each other?" I nodded, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. "Sarah and I go way back. We were friends in high school before life had pulled us in different directions, before the weight of responsibility had forced me to abandon my dreams and focus on keeping us afloat." Sarah seemed to sense the unspoken words, her expression softening. "We have a lot of catching up to do." As the chaos around us began to subside, replaced by a hushed reverence, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope blooming within me. The nightmare was over, and a new chapter was beginning. One filled with possibilities I'd long since given up on. And this time, I had my brother by my side, our bond forged stronger than ever by the fires of adversity. In the weeks that followed, life began to regain some semblance of normalcy. The chaos of the aborted wedding faded into a distant memory, replaced by a newfound sense of hope and possibility. Levi, to his credit, handled the fallout with grace and resilience. While the wounds of Amanda's betrayal still stung, he refused to let her actions define him. Instead, he threw himself into his work, channeling his energy into something positive. And slowly but surely, the light began to return to his eyes. "I'm dating someone new," he announced one evening over dinner at my place. A shy smile played on his lips as he spoke. "Her name's Emily, and she's nothing like Amanda." I couldn't help but grin at the obvious affection in his tone. "That's great, bro. I'm happy for you." Levi nodded, his expression turning pensive. "She knows about what happened, and she doesn't care. Can you believe that?" I could, in fact, believe it. Emily was a kind-hearted woman who valued loyalty and honesty above all else, qualities that Amanda had sorely lacked. As the weeks turned into months, Levi's relationship with Emily blossomed, and I found myself welcomed into their little family with open arms. Gone were the days of feeling like a burden, an embarrassment to be hidden away. Emily treated me with genuine warmth and respect, and for the first time in years, I felt like I truly belonged. But perhaps the most unexpected development was the rekindling of my friendship with Sarah. After the disastrous wedding, we had exchanged numbers, promising to catch up over coffee. What started as a casual meetup quickly turned into something more, and before I knew it, we were spending more and more time together. "I can't believe we lost touch for so long," Sarah mused one evening as we strolled through the park, her hand warm in mine. I shrugged, a wistful smile tugging at my lips. Life has a way of pulling people apart, I guess. She nodded, her expression turning serious. "I'm just glad we found our way back to each other. You deserve to be happy, Ben." Those words, spoken with such genuine affection, stirred something deep within me, a longing for more, for a chance at the life I'd sacrificed so long ago. As the seasons changed and the leaves began to turn, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this point. The struggles, the heartache, the moments when I'd felt so utterly alone, they had all been leading up to this, a new beginning filled with promise and hope. And as I looked around at the people who had become my chosen family, Levi, Emily, and Sarah, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude. We may not have had much in the way of material wealth, but we had something far more precious. Each other. "You know, Levi," I said one evening as we sat on my porch, beers in hand, "we may not have much, but we have each other, and that's enough for me." He met my gaze, his eyes shining with a depth of understanding that only comes from shared experience. "You're right, Ben. You've always been right." With a contented sigh, he leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing on his lips. "We may have lost our way for a while, but we found our way back. And that's all that matters." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the quiet street, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over me. The nightmare was finally over, and a new chapter was beginning, one filled with love, laughter, and the unbreakable bond of family. And this time, I knew we were ready to face whatever life threw our way, together.